Okay, so tonight, instead of doing the regular Tehillim, Psalms, we're going to do moral lessons of the Parasha, which is what we usually do on Tuesday nights, but we're going to continue it tonight, Wednesday, because I won't be here next week. So tonight we'll be discussing Parashat Korach. Korach is known for the machloket, for the divisiveness. He stirred up a tremendous fight amongst the Jewish people in his opposition to Moshe and Aaron, in assuming that they were deciding on their own who would get the positions of power, positions of leadership. So he was upset. He was perhaps jealous as well. He had other problems. He was a very wealthy man, and he believed that because he's also part of the Shevet of Levi, part of the tribe of Levi, that perhaps the positions that were given out were not distributed in a democratic way, let's say. So he had ta'anot, he had some claims, he had some issues, and unfortunately, the way it was presented, his entire approach was very, very wrong, because it led to tremendous divisiveness, machloket. And whenever there's machloket, people take sides, it causes tremendous turmoil, and people get into arguments and fights, and it could be very, very nasty. There's all kinds of machloket. Sometimes the machloket is good, as we will see if it's l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, to really try to figure out the truth. People have different opinions. But this one was very, very different. It was a very, very ugly machloket that led to Korach and his congregation being swallowed into the ground. If you read the story, I'm not going to go into all the details, how this was a clear sign from Shamayim, from heaven, that Hashem was very, very unhappy with this whole thing, and obviously Korach was wrong. Otherwise that wouldn't have happened to him. What's interesting in this parasha is not so much what happened, but what was going on in this man's mind. We're talking about Korach, the tribe of Levi. He was a learned man, he was a wise man. He was from the tribe of Levi, not from the Asafsuf, not from the Erev Rav, not from the multitudes that joined the Jewish people who perhaps had other ideas, other cultures and the like, that somehow, would have gotten them to argue about anything. This is Korach, a very important individual. So it's a little bit difficult to understand, what does he want? What do you care that Moshe and Aaron are in charge? You really think that they're doing it in an unfair way? You really think that they're doing this on their own without Hashem making the decisions? Come on, you've seen the miracles. You should be convinced by now of the truth of all of this. So it's very difficult to understand, and obviously we don't have the opportunity to ask him directly. But we have commentaries, of course. We have the Midrash that describe in greater detail what went on. But what I would like to point out tonight is more the psychology behind what's going on, because that's ultimately what we want to learn, is what motivated him, what got him going. First, we need to know that machloket, as we call it in Hebrew, divisiveness, division, is something very destructive, whether it is in a family or whether it is in a government, in a nation. It could break up a beautiful home that started on the right foot. It could lead to all kinds of trouble. Civil war. Even in the United States they had a civil war that, amongst other things, was prompted by the argument with different opinions about slavery. But regardless of what the arguments are about, it could be very destructive. In government, instead of calling it machloket, we're going to call it political infighting, which is understood because people have heard about politics. So political infighting is something that everyone hears about all the time in every country in the world. This is going on. Unless, of course, we're talking about a dictatorship, perhaps, or if we're talking about a king who has complete power over his constituents. Otherwise, you're always going to have different parties. And why do they have different views? Why is it that we have, for example, in this country, Democrats and Republicans? Why can't they all more or less think alike about the more important issues? You know, if you look around, you will notice that the division between different views is being described as right and left, whether it's in Israel or in this country. There are some who are on the right, there are some people who are on the left. Leftists, you may have heard, conservatives, liberals, different kinds of opinions. People have just different views about many things. If you want to have a good understanding about human nature and why people think differently, astrology really does an excellent job. If you really get into it, you will notice, if you learn about the various signs, and I have lectures about each one, how people are so different. And for good reason. Hashem did not want everyone to be the same. We need all types of people in this world. We need different abilities that people have and can contribute in different ways. There's not one person that can do everything. You have a man and you have a woman, and they complement each other. So certain views, even though they're different, they can be somewhat compatible and they can get along, and each one can complement the other. Doesn't mean that the two of them are going to be right at any given time. But it's good to hear different sides in order to arrive at what is best for the circumstances. Because sometimes a particular view could be acceptable at a certain time, and a different view acceptable at another time, depending on the circumstances. So it's good if there is discussion, and it's done in a diplomatic way, in a pleasant way, without too much argument. The two respect each other. So in astrology, you actually can get to see a great deal of these differences. Differences in mentality, differences in how people see life, what is important to them, how they go about doing certain things. And the same is true in psychology. If you learn some psychology, you will also see that there are methods of how we can figure out people, what their preferences are, how they see things. And we realize after learning all that there's different ways of looking at certain things. But the moment we say there are different ways of looking at certain things, does that mean they're all right? How could we know the truth? It's not possible that they are always all right. Well, sometimes it is possible that the two opposing sides are both right, and we're going to talk about that, when that is possible. But generally speaking, it is difficult to know. There is definitely one that is more correct at any given time, but it is difficult to know. How therefore do they decide in governments what to do with all these differing views? They go by the majority. Well, that's good, that makes some sense. The majority rules. Another possibility is you compromise. It could be that the two views are somewhat close to each other, and we go with something in between the two of them. That's very, very nice. A compromise is always something that is welcome, the healthiest thing to do. The situation, however, becomes a lot more serious when, besides people being different because of their background, because of astrology, because of all kinds of reasons, including education, it becomes more complex and more difficult and more challenging as a result of what they call in psychology cognitive bias. I'm not going to get into too deeply into what that means, but the word bias you do recognize. There are certain biases. This particular bias, or this category of bias, I should say, is basically when people are not being completely objective. And that's a shame, because if people are not going to be objective, it's going to be very difficult for them to accept even something which is logical and reasonable, because of some bias that they have, cognitive bias inside of them, which leads them to have automatically, by nature, certain preferences And it limits the ability of them seeing the entire picture. Because if somebody would be able to see the entire picture, and he would use logic, he would come to a different decision, different conclusion. But because of their cognitive bias, they're somewhat limited in being able to see the entire picture. So they're not being completely objective. Well, when somebody's not going to be completely objective, then he's going to continue to argue his point without even giving himself a chance to accept that somebody else may be right. And that is where things become more and more difficult. The two sides are not able to get along. The Torah was given to us, the Jewish people, for this reason too. There are other reasons why the Torah was given to us. Hashem wants us to lead our life guided by the Torah. But one idea behind this Torah is it's a map on how to live our life. And it makes it easy in many ways because it tells us right from left, right from wrong. So it makes it easy. You would think it makes it easy. But there are many people who have the Torah, know the Torah, and still do not practice what the Torah says, do not observe all the mitzvot. Or they sometimes succumb to their evil inclination knowingly. Or if they're ignorant, unknowingly, that they're doing something wrong. The Torah, therefore, would make it easy for people, if they wanted to follow the Torah, as to what to do in certain situations. So, on the one hand, it would be easy. On the other hand, however, you still find, even those who are learned in Torah sometimes have machloket, sometimes the chachamim, the sages, have differing opinions. The whole Gemara, the whole Talmud, is an excellent example of where you have different opinions. And how could that be? To make things a little bit more interesting, in Shamayim they say, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. The two sides are saying the truth. They're both acceptable to God. And I have a lecture about this too, about those issues that the rabbis argued about. The scholars disagreed. How could they disagree? Well, certain areas are not so clear. They're not always black and white. There's room for other opinions. So even though we have a clear tradition, there are all kinds of issues that come up that are not written in the Torah or even in the Talmud. Take, for example, I'm just going to give a quick example, but there are many. In today's world, we have something called in vitro fertilization, which you may have heard. It didn't exist as far as we know years ago. There's no clear discussion about how this works. Is it permissible? How could it be done? And this leads to other more complicated issues. Surrogate mother. Does it make a difference if she's Jewish or not Jewish? And I don't want to really get into that, but you get the idea of what I'm talking about. Things that are not mentioned in the Gemara, which presents complex halacha, complex issues that need to be resolved. Someone who's very familiar with the halacha, with the Jewish law, needs to give an opinion. And how is he going to base his opinion on what? He has to be very learned, gifted in analysis, and of course, most important, siyata dishmaya, divine help, divine assistance to be able to resolve complex issues. So it is possible that sometimes, even amongst the rabbis, you will find differing opinions. So it's not just the astrology, it's not just the background. They're all religious, they're all wise. It could be that they arrived on their own, through their own analysis, what they feel should be the halakha, the law, in a particular case. What we do know, however, is that it is possible to arrive at the truth. It is possible. And it is possible, as I said, for the two of them to be truth. How is it possible? As long as the two are motivated to reach a conclusion, a decision, l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. So if they're motivated for the right reasons, they're in the search of the truth, what would Hashem say? What is the truth about this particular case? What is the halakha? If they're motivated to do it l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, they're going to arrive at the truth. Again, it's possible that both of them are correct. And then what do? We're going to apply the one that is held by the majority. We're always going to follow the majority opinion, unless there's other reasons to follow another opinion. So, great. If we have a major issue to tackle, even though we have the Torah, but it's not written in the Torah what to do, if we have a major issue, what do? We hopefully will tackle this issue l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, and we will arrive at the truth. Very good. The problem is that most machloket, most arguments, most discussions in today's world is not l'shem shamayim. So when you hear the word machloket, argument, discussions, what you're hearing for the most part is politics and other issues that get involved. Everything except for the truth. You think people care about the truth? Most of the time, no. So this could be very, very ugly. Very, very bad. If people argue, fight, and sometimes people become enemies as a result of that too, only because their machloket is not l'shem shamayim. And as a result of that, you can have a tremendous division in a community, in a family, where people take sides, husband and wife, thinking already about getting a divorce because they can't get along because of some machloket that they have. That is why, in this parasha, you find an emphasis, not just a brief description of what happened to Korach, an emphasis, a lengthy description of what went on somewhat, and how it ended in their death, in the death of Korach and his congregants. And how did they die? A very unnatural death. Why? An unnatural death? Yeah, that the ground, the earth beneath them opened up, but it didn't stay open. After they were swallowed in, it closed. Because a lot of times, the ground, the earth opens up. Earthquakes and the like. Though here, it closed to convince everyone who was still in doubt, this is min hashamayim, this is from heaven. This couldn't have happened by itself. This was not just by chance a freak act of nature. Hashem was very upset. What we're dealing with here was a chilul Hashem, a terrible desecration of God's name. Divisiveness amongst people who are of the same community. And what's a chilul Hashem? Chilul Hashem is a bad example. When people see great people, righteous people, supposedly righteous people, learned people, doing certain things, they say to themselves, the impression that they get, this is what they are. This is who they are. This is what they represent. This is Judaism. This is what the Torah says to do. It leaves a very bad impression on them. And sometimes they even copy or learn from that to act the same, to do the same. Chilul Hashem is so bad. The rabbis tell us that Hashem does not atone. There's no kapara until the person dies. How come? Because it's difficult to fix. Go ahead and get all those people that were present at the time when they observed this terrible act. Bring them all back and excuse yourself, explain yourself, try to correct it. How are you going to do that? The impression was made. And therefore, rabbis tell us, Chilul Hashem, for the sin of desecrating Hashem's name, especially in public, there is punishment in this world. They don't wait for the world to come. Even in this world, the person is going to pay for it somehow, at some point of his life. And this is true even if he did it bishgaga, even if he did the Chilul Hashem unintentionally. Chilul Hashem, you have to be very careful. It's a very, very serious sin. But what can we do? This is what happens when people get involved in machloket. And they shouldn't. Many times they don't have to. Don't get involved in a fight that is not yours. The more so, obviously, if it's not yours. Don't don't get involved. As Shlomo Melech says, it's like holding onto the ear of a dog. He's going to bite you. You get involved, this is not your machloket. Stay out. But why do people not argue L'Shem Shamayim? Why is it difficult for them not to argue L'Shem Shamayim? Why should it be difficult? L'Shem Shamayim is the ultimate thing you want to do for the sake of heaven. People have a hard time doing it because of what we just said, cognitive bias. An easier word for that is called negiut. People have some sort of interest. People are either related, or some bias. So whenever there's a little bit of a bias, any type of bias you want to call it, that interferes with one's best judgment. So to do something L'Shem Shamayim is difficult, unless one is very, very strong about that. Most people are not. They have that bias in them. That's human nature. We're going to talk about towards the end how to overcome that, of course. But in order to understand how people get into arguments, choose sides, even though they're completely wrong, is because of that bias. Very simple. Family. You know, he's your brother. He's your cousin. He's your good friend. Regardless, that already blinds us sometimes from judging the situation properly. What should have been done with Korach? What should have been done that would have hopefully solved the situation? Had they really intended L'Shem Shamayim, what could they have done to figure out the truth? Easily, quickly. Make a goral. You know what a goral is?
Lottery.
Goral means lottery, right? Flip of a coin, they call it in this country. Flip a coin. Put all the names in the basket, in a hat, and choose one. Do you know that this is completely acceptable to do? Many times in certain European cities, when there was an argument, a machloket about who will be the next leader, the next rabbi, there were two contenders. What do? See, when it's the son of the rabbi that passed away, well, the son has certain priorities. He's in first position. There is certain halacha, but what if there's no son? Two contenders, they each want the job. What do? How do you choose the best man for the job? We would love to choose the best. They're both good. Or they're both no good. Which one is not as bad? Anyway, one has to be chosen. Put the names in the basket and let a child pick the name. Do you know that this method is min hashamayim? This method will prove to them who Hashem wants. It doesn't just happen by chance. They're just picking randomly a piece of paper. Hashem doesn't want there to be a machloket. Doesn't want it to be an argument. So I'm going to help you out. Put all the names in the basket, in a hat. And the one that you pick out will be the one that I agreed with, that I want for the community, that I think is best suited for this job. So why wouldn't they do that? Now, if you look at the Parasha, you will notice that later on it was done in a different method, using the staffs of each one. The one that blossomed, remember, with the flowers, that will be the one that Hashem chose. But it's interesting why that wasn't done in the first place. Stop the whole machloket, just take the staffs of each one. Let's see who Hashem chooses. A goral, pick a name, and that will tell you who Hashem was. The Satan is not going to allow it to happen. People are going to say, no, that's not acceptable for me to do. Why not? This is completely acceptable. When people have differences of opinion, we don't know who to choose. This is the way to do it. A lot of people would go along with that. Here, the Satan would never have allowed it to happen in the first place. They were so upset. They weren't thinking straight. What did we say before? They were not being objective. So to do something like that, which would have been a quick fix, a quick solution, they didn't even think of it. And if you would have suggested, they wouldn't have accepted possibly. Why not? The Satan is involved. And that's a very important idea that people have to remember at all times. When there's machloket, there's a greater than 90% chance that the Satan is fomenting this machloket. He's stirring it up. The Satan, the evil inclination. He wants them to break up. He wants them to fight. Satan would not have allowed a simple solution like a Goral to solve their problems. Yes, whatever the Goral says is Hashem's wishes, and we'll go along with it. No. People, because of their interest, because of their bias, because of their jealousy, they can't see straight. They can't be objective. So how do we know Korach was not doing what he was doing? He was not saying what he was saying L'Shem Shamayim. What proof is there? Besides the fact that he didn't want to go out. Besides that he would not have accepted that method. Where can we see it in his character, perhaps? The rabbis tell us, how do you recognize an individual? Is there a way that you can tell what he's all about? You want to be his partner. You want him as a son-in-law. You want to be his friend, but you want to get to know him a little bit better. Is there any way that you can get to know him without spending years with him? The rabbis tell us, Ha'adam nikar b'kiso b'koso b'ka'aso. You can recognize someone by analyzing the following three things: his pocket, the cup, and his anger. What does that mean? You can recognize someone through his pocket in money matters. Is he stingy or not? Does he argue about money? Is he honest? Does he pay on time? Is he pressured when people ask him for money? Anything that has to do with money, observe a person's reaction in this particular area. You get to know a lot about him. So that's one area, bekiso, through his pocket, meaning money matters. Through how he handles money matters, there's a lot you can tell about him. Koso, through the cup, how he drinks. Talk about alcohol now. Does he drink a lot? What does he say when he gets drunk? How often does he drink? It tells you something about the individual. And last but not least, the ka'aso, through his anger. How often does he get angry? What does he get angry about? How does he behave when he gets angry? All of that tells you something about the individual. And then you have what psychologists would call projection. When Korach complained to Moshe, Madua titnaseu, why do you make yourself so great? Why do you elevate yourself above everyone else? He was projecting, as psychologists would say, projecting his own fault. A lot of times when people had a certain fault, a certain weakness, they project it and they call someone else by that. You are arrogant, and he is the arrogant person. That's called projection. Projecting that fault on someone else, what they really have. So when he said, Madua titnaseu, how come you're making yourself so great above everyone else? He was basically pointing that he's an arrogant individual. He's the one that's elevating himself. So we have enough clues now. I didn't analyze how he drinks. I didn't analyze here necessarily other facets of his personality, but there's definitely a lot to observe. His anger. And even his pocket. He was a very wealthy man. He was maybe a little greedy too. Maybe all that money got to his head. But here, projection. Look what he was calling Moshe now. Moshe is the humblest person in the world. He's projecting his own weakness, his own fault onto others. But I would like to add my own explanation as to how we can tell that this whole mahloket, this whole division was not L'Shem Shamayim. It says that Korach gathered everyone, right? To make a big show, to show that it's not just him, everyone is upset. And they all came and joined him, a lot of people. Had this been a gathering for a mitzvah, had Korach said, please come and join me for this mitzvah that I'm going to participate in on this day, this hour, you wouldn't have had so many people come. It just happens to be that whenever it's not a mitzvah, it's something unholy, like an argument, everybody wants to come. I'll prove it to you. If I get up one day in the synagogue and tell everyone, I will be delivering a very important speech or giving an important lecture on this day and this hour, you will have people come who are interested either in hearing me or hearing about the topic, or some people want to come and learn. But if I tell everyone, on this and this day, we're having bingo, And we're going to give away prizes. And one of those prizes will be a weekend in Las Vegas for free, 5-star hotel. You know how many will come to that show? Many, many people. How come? Why to that they will come much more than to a mitzvah, to shiur, a class of Torah? Why? Because the Satan is involved in that proposition, not in the shiur Torah. That he doesn't want people to come. So he helps, yes. And if you serve alcohol, even better.
And shiluk kebab too.
Right?
Shiluk kebab.
Sure. Serve a lot of food, of course. So this will definitely entice people because that has more koach, more power. This is on the side of the tumah. Not that it's unholy per se, it's not necessarily unholy, but it's definitely not holy like Torah. It's not, you cannot compare it. Why are you playing bingo? Now obviously if you raise money for a good cause, then it's a good cause. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just fun. Just to, bring people together. That's very, very nice. But still, it does not derive its strength from the holy side. It derives its strength from the other side. And that is why they will be more successful, because the Satan does push that much more than the other side. So in the end, what happens to Korach? They die a very, very strange, unnatural death as a result of what they did to remind the Jewish people this is unacceptable, this is serious, this is machloket, this is divisive, this is destructive. We don't want the Jewish people to engage in something destructive. Look what happened to the first and second temple. We lost our temple, we're in exile until this day partially because of that, of the sinat chinam, the baseless hatred. But after Korach dies, the Torah describes that not only did he die and his congregants, the rechush, his possessions, went with him too, all his money. Who needs to know about that? Why would all his possessions, what he owned, go with him? Perhaps this also comes to clarify that sometimes a person's undoing is his money. What brought him down, what caused his downfall, is all the money that he had, which led him to think very highly of himself, which led him to covet even more, to want more. And all that money, what it could have easily done to him and to others, is to make them forget that Kadosh Baruch Hu is the one that is mashgiach. He oversees everything in this world, and he makes the decisions, not we do. You think you made your money? He gave you that money. But a lot of people are going to think that they made the money, they worked hard. No, you may have worked hard, yes, but Hashem sent you the money. Whatever we have, our children, our spouse, everything is from Shamayim, is from heaven. Of course we make the effort, but He is the one that blesses the effort, or chooses not to, God forbid, sometimes. So we have to attribute that to Him. And since there's a disconnect over here, apparently there's a disconnect, because what he was doing was not L'Shem Shamayim, for the sake of heaven. It's because maybe all that rechush, all those possessions that he had, got to his head. And somewhat made him forget that Hashem is the one that decides everything, not you, not even Moshe. So in order to impress upon everyone who still remained alive that this is from Shamayim, not from Moshe. It's not that he was a magician. It's not that he knew how to open up the ground. This is from Shammai. It was a clear sign. Everybody realized it. And we're all afraid. And hopefully they learned something from it. It didn't help, by the way, right away. Sometimes people are impressed, but later on they cool off. But it definitely left its mark. And it was documented in the Torah for us to learn from. Be careful with machloket. Stay away from it at all costs. We're talking about here machloket that is not for the sake of heaven, of course. If you read on into the Midrash, you will find that there are two stars here. You know, like a movie star? Two important players that are not mentioned in the Torah.
Okay.
But definitely played an important role behind the scenes. The wives. The wife of Korach and the wife of another individual called On ben Pelet, who was from Reuven. They were close to each other, and On ben Pelet was going to go along with Korach. At the last minute he did not, and he survived. Who gets the credit? His wife. Two different kinds of women. The wife of Korach actually instigated him. She's the one that told him, Moshe is making fun of you. And it's an interesting midrash if you want to see how she's somewhat contributed to the fire. As it is, Korach is already upset on his own. She contributed a lot to the way he felt. She basically instigated the whole thing, perhaps. She got it moving. And what about On ben Pelet? What made him change his mind at the last minute? His wife was smart. Says, my dear husband, why go and join Korach? Regardless of who you're with, whether you're with Moshe or whether you're with Korach, you're never going to be the leader. You're not going to gain anything from this machloket. And he says to himself, you know what? She's got a good point. She's right. It makes sense. He's not going to gain, so why go with Korach more than with Moshe? On that, the pasuk says, "Chachmot nashim banta beta ve'ivelet biyadea teharsena." The wise women build their home, and the foolish ones destroy it. Who is the wise woman? The wife of On ben Pelet. Who's the foolish one? The wife of Korach. Perfect pasuk for this example. You see, if you marry a good woman, a wise woman, you're a lucky man. As long as you listen to her. You know, women have an intuition, a very strong intuition for some things, not for everything, but for some things. So you got to listen to them. But on the other hand, you have to be careful because there are women who, like the wife of Korach, who get their husbands into trouble because of jealousy and the like. So women were behind the scenes here, playing a very active role. My question is, how did the wife of On ben Pelet convince her husband?
Got him drunk?
No, what was it? Was it her charisma, her words? Was it just her logic? What was it? She could have said something else. What could she have said? My husband, you are wrong to participate in the machloket. It's a terrible sin. Moshe is a special man. She could have said all these things. Instead, she chose to say, you're not going to gain anything. So listen carefully, this is a very important idea. Had she told her husband, had she criticized him, which many of us would do, you're doing something wrong, it is not ethical, you are ungrateful. Any musar, ethics, words of rebuke, her husband would not have listened to her. He would have possibly resisted those criticism. Because whenever there is any excuse or any objection for spiritual reasons, like you're wrong, this is unethical, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, will come and argue and retort. No, but this is a mitzvah, because Moshe Rabbeinu has taken the law into his hands. He has done something abusive. All kinds of excuses. You see, when you come up with a spiritual explanation of why something is wrong, the Yetzer Hara will supply endless reasons of why this is acceptable. For example, Lashon Hara, I've given this example. Lashon Hara, to speak negatively about someone, slanderous talk. Somebody might come and say, here, it's a mitzvah to speak about him. He's a Rasha, he's a wicked man. It is okay, I'm telling you, I give you permission to speak about him. I'm telling you, God would agree with me. The Yetzer Hara would say that this is an exception. So if you come up with a spiritual, I call this a spiritual explanation of why something is wrong, expect the Yetzer Hara to tell you why it's okay nevertheless. She didn't do that. What did she say? I'm going to use the language of the Yetzer Hara, of the evil inclination. What's the evil inclination's language? What is Kedai and what is not Kedai? What is worth it and not worth it? The Yetzer Hara tells you, enjoy life, it's worth it, you'll have pleasure. He works in a different way to convince the human being. It's kidai lecha, it's worth it for you, it's okay, you'll enjoy it. I'm going to use the wife of Omer Pellet tells him, she says, I'm going to use the Yetzer Hara's language. My dear husband, lo kidai lecha, you're not going to gain anything from this, you see? Are you going to gain or not gain? No, I'm not going to gain. You see? Then why do it? Very simple. She used the language of the evil inclination. If something is worth it or not worth it. No musar, no criticism, no rebuke, because that would not have worked. What did work? The language that the evil inclination uses to convince people. It's worth it for you. And in this case, it wasn't worth it for him. How do we see the evil inclination acting this way today? Where do we see it? That he uses this language. Also a very important idea, very important point. Every day, we all have a struggle with the Yetzer Hara in different ways. One way people have the struggle is to get up early in the morning to go to pray, to go to a shiur Torah now or later. To do a mitzvah, the Yetzer Hara gets involved, and what does he do? Gives you excuses. You're tired. Do it tomorrow. Go tomorrow. Wow, what's so urgent today? Oh, you're busy. Remember, you have another appointment. All kinds of excuses. The Yetzer Hara will always try to cool us off from mitzvot, from spiritual things. So you have to use his language. How do you counter his language? Listen to this. The Yetzer Hara is talking to you. You're tired. Do it another time. Yetzer Hara, had I been taking a flight early in the morning, you would have made me wake up several hours before so I don't miss that flight, right? You would not have discouraged me. Do it another time. You're tired. For a flight, to catch a flight, you would allow me to get up early in the morning. Had this been because of a business appointment that I have an opportunity to make a lot of money, of course you would encourage me to go. How could you not go on time? Wait a minute. Evil inclination. How come when it comes to money and when it comes to a flight, you don't discourage me? You don't come up with these excuses? There's no excuse. That means I can get up if I really wanted to. I get up for those things, and I go for those things. Why can't I get up and go to a minyan, to a shiur? Oh, it's a mitzvah. And that's where the opposition begins. We must remember at all times there is continuous opposition for us to do the right thing. Hashem set it up that way. That's why we are rewarded, because we struggled with the evil inclination, and hopefully we overcame it. We defeated him. So you see the evil inclination in action on a regular basis. And that's his language. Push it off tomorrow. Really? Would you tell me to push off my flight? No, you wouldn't. How come you're telling me to push off the Torah? That means you don't want me to do it. You have to be smart. So now we've come to the big question. Machloket is terrible. How do we overcome machloket? How do we not come to it? How can we overcome biases? Because they exist. The rabbis tell us, Kol hamumim adam roeh chutz minigei atzmo. A person can see the blemishes, the defects in other people, but he cannot see his own. A kohen who would have to analyze if an individual has tzarat, has that discoloration of the skin, he would have to, of course, be familiar with that particular discoloration, if it is unclean or not. But what if he had it himself? He would not be able to check out himself and render a decision on his own discoloration. He would have to ask someone else. One cannot see his own blemishes, whether he has an issue, a problem. He has to ask someone else. So therefore, because of that, whenever we do have some doubt about something, whenever an issue presents itself that we're unsure, and we're somewhat biased to it, because it applies or affects us, ask someone else. Don't make this decision yourself, because you may not be completely objective. When it comes to relationships, husband and wife, husband says this, the wife says this. This can happen a lot of times in one's life. Ask a third party. Tell your wife, honey, don't you want to do what Hashem says? I want to do what Hashem says, not what I want. Don't you also want to do what Hashem says? Let's ask a third party. Let's ask the rabbi. Let's ask someone else. And hopefully, Hashem will give that third individual the insight, the proper insight as to what is correct and what we should follow. But if we leave the two of them to decide, they're going to argue for a long, long time, not get anywhere, and fight and fight and fight. And worse, if the kids hear about the fights, it makes things even worse. You want to avoid that as much as possible. We're not perfect. We occasionally maybe voice our opinions very loud, and maybe we feel strong about certain things, and that's okay. But be careful not to overdo it, not to exaggerate it. And just remember, you always have a solution. Ask someone else who's not biased, who's not a relative. Perhaps he will be able to clarify things. As far as bias, getting rid of bias, it's almost impossible. It's very difficult. It's something natural in us. But the rabbis do tell us that one way to remove biases, or at least get it under control, is when one works on purifying himself, working on his midot, on his character, on his nature, to become a better person. What kind of a person? So the rabbis tell us that there's one characteristic that is always helpful in life, and that's koach hanetina, the act of giving. If you learn Pirkei Avot, you will see that one of the areas that is very much suggested by the rabbis to cultivate is the area of lev tov, a good heart. A good heart will have a good eye, will be a good neighbor, will be a good friend. You will be an individual that will be pleasant, easy to get along with, helpful in life. An individual that would want to help and contribute to society. A good heart. Cultivate a good heart, which eventually will help you not to be greedy and to be grateful, thankful to people. A lot of good things will come out of cultivating a good heart. So we all have weaknesses, but if we focus on cultivating the act of giving, tzedakah, being kind, doing acts of chesed, that's called netina, giving, then that act of giving helps in removing biases, because you're so into giving that it won't interfere so much as it would have otherwise. Because remember, a bias does interfere. It does not let us see objectively all the time. So we need to do something to counteract that. Become a giving person, and that will help. Also, another idea is if one gets used to doing everything l'shem shamayim. For example, when you go to sleep, Hashem, I'm going now to sleep because I want to regain all my strength. So tomorrow I get up and I feel refreshed, so I can serve you, pray with the proper kavanah, the proper intent. I'm going to sleep so I can get that strength to serve you another day. I'm not going to sleep because I enjoy sleeping or because I'm tired. I'm doing this, even this act that I physically need, I'm doing it l'shem shamayim. This is the purpose of why I want to sleep, so that I regain my strength to serve you. Same thing with eating. Hashem, I'm eating so that I have the strength to be able to observe the mitzvot, so that I stay healthy, so I stay alive, and I can serve you. So you're focusing on the mundane, on that which is physical, and a real personal need, you're refocusing it l'shem shamayim. I'm learning Torah. Why? Not because I'm curious, not because I just want to be knowledgeable, because it's a mitzvah. You asked me to. I'm doing it for you. Most people don't learn that way, but hopefully they will come to that stage at some point in their life. Hopefully they will come to that level, even though they start off perhaps curious, perhaps learning it because they just want to learn, because they're told to learn, because they're in school. It is the hope that with time they will come to appreciate Torah so much that they will learn it for its real sake. The same thing with work. I work. Why? Because Hashem, I want to be able to pay my bills so that I can send my kids to a good Jewish school, so I can raise them in the proper way. Then you're working. It's work. It has nothing to do with a mitzvah. But you're transforming that work into a l'shem shamayim for the sake of heaven. So when we get used to doing all those mundane things, l'shem shamayim, this will help us do hopefully everything l'shem shamayim. You see? Because we're getting used to, I'm doing this l'shem, I'm not doing this for myself. The vast majority of people in the world don't do this. But a lot of these ideas are brought down in the Hasidic books, in the Kabbalah. Train yourself to do everything that is mundane and physical and is personal to you. That too, l'shem shamayim. And in this way, this I think is a powerful way of getting one to do everything in his life l'shem shamayim for the sake of heaven. Also, it's important to keep in mind, every human being has a mission. Jew or non-Jew. The fact that we were born, we're created, Hashem wants us here for some reason. We all are endowed with a divine spark, a soul. So that means we're all important to Him. Obviously, in order to stay dear to Him, you have to follow His instructions. A lot of people are important to Him, but eventually they rebel against Him. I'm not talking about those. But generally speaking, the average person is given an opportunity to serve Hashem in some way. We may not be privy to know what is that person's mission, personal mission. He may not even know, but he needs to know, at the very least, that he will be taken and guided to meet the people he needs. He will be given the tools he needs to be able to fulfill that mission. He may not want to, he may be lazy, that's a different story. So every individual, everyone, is special in some way and given the job that Hashem wants him to have. Not everyone is a carpenter, not everyone is a plumber, not everyone is a rabbi, not everybody is a doctor, not everybody is a scribe. You have different people in different capacities. We need all of them. So Korach, Mr. Korach, let Hashem decide. He makes the decisions anyway all the time. Didn't you know that? It wasn't Moshe's idea. Whoever told you that? Maybe he was impressed. Moshe did so much that maybe he made those decisions on his own. Okay. Here we're giving him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, even though we know that he was motivated for other reasons. Be careful. If you have an issue, by the way, with Moshe that you suspect, you're entitled to suspect, then go over to him in private. That would have been also another way of dealing with it. In private. Why did you do it in public and cause such a chilul Hashem? You have an issue, do it in private. Husband and wife, quietly, not in front of the kids. As much as possible. Don't do things of that nature in front of the kids. We sometimes forget that. So that is why we have to continuously learn and review these points. Look what happened back then with this machloket. That was not Hashem Shamayim. So if people would convince themselves that everyone has a unique job, they wouldn't be as jealous. They would hopefully be happy for the person, as long as that person is doing his job, whatever it may be. And this is where Korach was right. Korach was right in one thing he said. Kol ha'edah kedoshim hem. They're all holy. Moshe, not only you. Everyone is holy. On that, sir, you're right. Yes, they all are all holy. But let Hashem decide. And He's decided differently. Not what you think. So just to end, people have to continuously remember this point, because it can easily forget it, especially if they are involved. Stay away from machloket at all cost, even if it means you have to pay some money to settle the case. Compromise. Avoid going to a court, if you have no choice, go to Bet Din, go to a Jewish court and settle it. If you have no choice, you can't come to some sort of agreement. But the best option is always to settle out of court, out of Bet Din. Settle it amongst each other, continue to be friends. Compromise, even if it costs you some money. The money that you will spend on the compromise is worth it to avoid eternal enmity, hatred with another human being. Who needs this? You won't be able to look him straight in the face. Avoid it even if it costs a little bit of money. A little bit. Obviously if we're talking about tons of money, it's a different story. I'm talking about a situation which can be resolved, but it costs a little bit of money. If you're part of the machloket, be careful how you conduct the machloket. If you're already involved, it already started, you have to be careful how to conduct yourself and try to finish it in a decent way. Sometimes we can't avoid it. We're involved. Even then, you're involved already. Be careful how you conduct yourself. No cursing, no yelling, no lashon hara, no gossiping. And last but not least, one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves to help ourselves is to pray to Hashem. Shelo ekashel, a special prayer, which is one of the prayers we say every day. Not to stumble. Not to stumble could be not to stumble in sin, not to stumble into a machloket, into a situation which we would never want to be in. Hashem, please don't let me ever stumble in something which you do not approve of. I don't want to get involved. I'm already telling you now. But sometimes the Yetzirah, the evil inclination, pushes us and gets us upset, and we feel that we should do something about it. And then we catch ourselves sometimes. But this is going to lead to Chilul Hashem. It's going to be a big machloket. It's going to be very, very bad. Hashem, help me. Shelo yikashel. I would also recommend, if you ever know of any couple, any situation where people are really not getting along and are arguing, try to make peace between them. That's a big mitzvah, lasot shalom. Husband and wife, people who are not getting along, people who haven't spoken to each other for a long time. Beautiful mitzvah. Very few people, unfortunately, embrace this. They don't have the time, they don't want to deal with it, or they don't know what to do. That's something else. But some people could help. At least diffuse the machloket. At least get him some help. If you can't do it yourself, get them some help. Convince them to go for help if you can't do anything about it. That is Ohev Shalom Verodef Shalom, one who loves peace, pursues peace. Put more effort into making peace than into breaking up people's lives with machloket. By actively involving ourselves in pursuing peace, B'ezrat Hashem, we will soon merit. Hashem yaseh shalom benenu. Hashem oz lamo yiten, Hashem yavarech et amo v'shalom. Hashem will bring peace on all of Am Yisrael very soon.
Amen.